Welcome to Our Next Existence by Katie and the Chorus. I'm Katie, former technology strategist turned reluctant spiritual medium, and I channel messages from the Chorus, a group of beings just beyond our sensory perceptions who are loving, expansive, and who greatly enjoy sharing their perspective of us. Join us each week as we share and discuss their ideas about humanity's existence, purpose, and future. Concepts you can draw from to accelerate your path, expand your perceptions, and ultimately step into the flow of the universe and your life. Welcome back, everyone. And if you're new here, welcome. For those of you who joined us last week, have you been a little more conscious of all your beliefs about time since last week's episode? If not, don't worry. It'll keep growing. Speaking of time, I have spent a lot of it the past few years looking at internet memes. I mean, thank God for the internet. People's sense of humor out there about the shit we all go through, has helped so much. I was pinned one last night. It's a picture of a cow standing about ankle deep or hoof deep in the ocean. And the cow is just looking out at the waves. It's like a legitimate picture that somebody took of a cow standing in the ocean looking at the waves. And the person wrote, "I don't know what this cow is going through, but I can relate." Thank you, Mondi Zondo. There was another one from last night. And the guy tweets, "Next week has been exhausting." Thank you, at Jay Nardino. You see, that's that forward projection shit we all do that we talked about last week. That's totally it. Next week hasn't even happened yet, but you've got it all worked out in your head. You've already held all the meetings in your mind. There's another one. Mikey at Glam and Gore writes, "I have never come across a meme more me than this." And it's a picture of an angry SpongeBob. And it says, "I'm so stressed that relaxing makes me more stressed because I'm not working on what's making me stressed." Oh, being human. That is exactly what today's episode is about. We're going to talk about some of this stuff that we all feel, that we all sense, and the things that we feel agitated about, that we feel like we need to do something about these sensations. But first, the chorus has something to say to that effect. In the first part of the episode, you'll hear directly from the chorus themselves, and then afterwards, we will discuss. And now I give you the chorus. Humans do not always know what it is that they are perceiving. Humans of your day and time are actually capable of perceiving a great deal of energy that is around them that is not always expressed in their awareness of what is happening on the frequencies of the five senses. That is to say that you may feel an emotion, an agitation, a frustration, a fear, a knowing that comes to you outside of what you are tracking, in a sense, in the activities that you engage in with eyes and ears and hands and mouth and etc. Humanity is just awakening to these sensations. And as you do so, you are still active in the perspective of a five senses human. And thus, you say to yourself, "I don't know why I feel this way." You look around at what is going on in your life that you see on the five senses. You examine your day. You examine how you feel about these things. And when you find a mismatch, you are often frustrated or even disappointed in yourselves for feeling a way that you judge, that you deem to be inappropriate or inaccurate. Beloved ones, we would like to suggest to you that what you are sensing and perceiving is completely valid and is completely appropriate, for you are receiving new and different information than what is manifesting in front of you on the five senses. We see right now in humankind a great deal of agitation, of mental instability, as you would call it, in large part due to your burgeoning abilities to perceive more, to receive more than is validated by your five senses. How much humanity will grow and change as you begin to accept these sensations as valid, with or without the knowledge as to why you received the sensations that you did. As with most things in the energetic universe, the allowance, the acceptance, the trust comes before more of those things flow to you. Humanity is able to receive these sensations now because of the millennia of increased trust that you have experienced in your own sensations, in your own emotions, in the feelings and sensations that you have as you go through your days. As we have mentioned before, humanity now has names for these things. You write books about these emotions, you talk about these emotions, and you have begun to understand that they are messengers in a way, representing to you more of what's going on than perhaps you had previously realized. This is your growing consciousness, beloved ones. This is your expansion. That not too long ago, humans went from action to action to action with little to no awareness of the emotions themselves that they experienced by way of those actions, by way of the activation of those beliefs. In many ways, you should celebrate how far you have come, that even the youngest among you now understand the names for these things that they are feeling, how to perhaps embrace them more and allow them to flow through you. Can you understand, therefore, that today humanity is expanding into the perception of more and different feelings as you once did with the concept of emotions that are so commonplace to you today? What will you decide to name these things? What is it that they are telling you? How will it help you as you navigate the energetic frequencies that you are expanding into? So many exciting questions and so many amazing experiences ahead. But first, of course, is the allowance of these things, is the acceptance of the idea that they may be true, that they may represent things that you are just beginning to perceive. that you are not fearful or anxious or frustrated or alert or any of the other things for no reason, that there is no flaw in your being that has somehow mistaken things in your day-to-day environment and has taken a perspective on them that you do not like or see as valid. Beloved ones, trust. Trust yourselves most of all. All sensations that you feel are coming to you for a reason. And should you feel something strong, and yet in your day-to-day environment, there is not much that you can think of to account for it, perhaps offer to yourself a new and alternative path that you are able to perceive things that are just coming into consciousness. Trust these knowings, trust these sensations, and allow the evidence, the reasons for them to begin to come through to you. For we would suggest there are amazing things on those frequencies. We love you infinitely, beloved ones. We love all the things you are aware of today, and we love all the things that you are coming to know. A couple years after I had been channeling the chorus, my husband and I decided to take a trip to a beach in Central America. I think it must have been our second getaway in our entire marriage. It was going to be a few days away from our son, just the two of us. And we were very excited about it. We booked the trip about, I would say, 3 months before it was time to go. And though I was very excited when we booked the trip, over the next 3 months, I experienced a variety of sensations of anxiety, nervousness, and almost a sense of dread. This sort of translated into a day-to-day scrutiny of why the hell am I feeling this way? Which, for each answer that I came to, maybe it was because of this work project, or maybe it was because our house needed to be organized, or whatever it was. As I addressed each of those things that came up as probable reasons, the sensations themselves did not diminish. So I kept going. I kept looking for more things that I felt like I needed to address or tie up or resolve. In that 3 months, it was very productive. We had our will written. We had the entire basement organized. I planned all sorts of things for my son while we were away. Everything was locked into plans and color coding and structure. And yet, the sensations did not diminish. And in fact, as the trip approached, I would say they grew. It got to the point that we almost didn't go. In fact, the night before, I told my husband that this would be the last romantic beach getaway we should ever do. Because it had been so stressful leading up to the trip, or so I thought. Once we got onto the airplane and landed at our destination and to the hotel, I walked into the room and promptly broke down in tears. So distraught, over where we were and what we were doing and what was coming. Now, as my husband often asked me what was wrong, and though I could tell him that I missed our son, that it was hard to be away from him, that we just hadn't traveled in a while, that maybe I was tired, that I certainly had many reasons to point to on the five senses spectrum, none of them quite explained the depth of how I was feeling, the volume of these emotions, the intensity of them. And I knew it, even as I tried to explain to him why I was feeling this way. Of course, I had the benefit of being able to connect to the chorus and ask them about this. And over the months, I'm sure they gave me lots of good advice. But to be honest, at this juncture, I can't quite recall all the things they told me in the months leading up to the trip. But I do very vividly recall what they told me while we were on the trip. The anxiety was so bad that after my husband and I had spent a day together and he was able to fall asleep, I would lay there wide awake, churning on all sorts of things. And finally, I would get up and go into the other room and channel. What the chorus emphasized for me was that I was able to perceive things that were coming, and that also what was coming would be what one might consider from the human perspective to be a rather big manifestation, meaning it would be very new. And if you've joined us for a few episodes, then you know that our sense of control, as we talked about in episode 4, largely comes from a sense of fit with our existing belief system, with our existing context. And so as we recreate largely the same limitations that we came here to experience, we feel a sense of control. That is what we would describe as that sensation. And we like it because for the most part, that's what we came here to experience, was the constant recreation, reinforcement of our own experience of limitation. However, as the chorus has described, now that humanity is starting to awaken, what we are beginning to prefer is something else, something that we might call change, something new and something different. However, also because awakening is so new to us that if we view it from our five senses perspective, the perception of that new energy can largely feel out of our control. It can feel like chaos, it can feel like disaster, or it can feel like a surprise. This is not inevitable, and this is not the way it will always feel. But for these first few steps into new energy, it often is perceived that way by humans today. So there I was in a hotel room in a tropical location with palm trees swaying outside my window, asking the chorus, what the hell? Because on paper, I should have felt elated. I should have felt on vacation. I should have been relaxed or happy. And at times I was. I did have moments of really enjoying the amazing location that we were at. But also there was this simultaneous track sort of playing inside of me that was still, even though we were on the vacation I had been dreading for months, overwhelmed by sort of anxiety and a sense of loss of control. The chorus replied that in my ability to be able to sense things that are coming energetically, that I also still could activate belief systems from the human perspective that sort of want to understand how that's all going to work out. In a sense, I was both at once. I was an expansive human, able to perceive things on broader wavelengths, but I was also still very present in the experience of limitation and the dynamic action of beliefs that when sensing a thing that has not yet manifested on the five senses, immediately jumps into a sort of action mode. Humans today call this action mode fight, flight, or sometimes freeze. That the mind often wants to do something in order to address or resolve something that is not quite manifested. A desire, an idea, a threat, whatever it is that hangs out there in the periphery, sort of that you know is coming, the mind responds with action. In last week's introduction to the episode, the Course actually gave us an energetic definition of action, which is, from their standpoint, a collision of three things simultaneously. The first is the recognition of the desire or the idea. The second being the identification that that desire or idea or whatever it is has not yet manifested on the five senses. And then the third being the activation of beliefs that dictate what to do in order to make that thing happen or appear or feel safe or whatever it is that was desired. Or, as the Course would say, acceptable expenditures of energy to address the lack of the thing that you have identified that you want or is coming, but that isn't there yet. As we've mentioned in previous episodes, the belief system complex is massive, is colossal, and is still largely unconscious to us. Beliefs are activated billions of times per second and create our version of this reality, basically. So, as we talked about last week in the episode on time, that we don't sit here billions of times per second and say, now I'm activating a belief about time, and now I'm activating a belief about deterioration, and now I'm activating. No, we're busy in the game. We are busy having the conversation. We're busy eating the food. We're busy thinking about what we're going to do tomorrow. We are busy in the experience of being human, not structuring the entire reality in which we have this experience. This is no more so true than in the beliefs about action, which have largely driven our existence here. If you think about being human, humans are often very busy. From the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, we are constantly taking in stimuli from our environment and then doing something about that. We see a door, we open it. We feel a sense of hunger, we go looking for food. We see someone walk up to us and say hi, we respond and communicate with them in spoken language. We are constantly reacting and interacting with our environments. As the Course has pointed out in recent weeks, the moments that we have where we sort of pull up from this day-to-day action are their examples of awakening that they point to for us. So at the end of a very busy day, when you come home from work and you finally kick off your shoes and throw up your feet, and someone says, "How was your day today? What did you do?" It's sort of in one of those moments that you say, "Oh, well, I did these things and I went here and I kind of felt like this." That ability to reflect on the experience of limitation here, the Course would say, is because of our awakening, that there is a space, that there is a growing distance between just being fully immersed in the game and then our broadening consciousness, which now has these moments where it kind of turns around and looks at the experience and processes it or is more aware of it than it was before. It was not too many millennia ago that humans went from day to day to day to day without really reflecting on it much and without even really being aware about how they felt in those moments. By contrast, a human today has many names for many different emotions, is ready to even discuss those emotions with others, and can often connect day-to-day actions to the reasons for those emotions. As the Chorus said today, even very young humans are being taught the names for these emotions and an awareness of them. To the Chorus, this is a perfect example of human awakening, that we are not just in the depths of anger, that we can step alongside it and say, I felt that. that was anger. I think I know why I felt that, and I can even identify it more rapidly in the future. Now, all of this works beautifully in creating an experience of limitation because it's a constant cycle. It's a constant perception of a desire, which is almost instantly transformed into a lack. It's not here yet. And then action, which we need to take to address the lack, which, as we have been talking about in terms of an energetic universe, where you put your energy, your resonance, or your attention, you're going to get more of. And humans have been the embodiment of a belief system that constantly directs us to what is lacking, to what is missing. If a human walks into a room that has a tile floor and there is one tile that is broken, the human will almost automatically look to the broken tile. If we get a desire or an idea of something, we instantly, practically instantly recognize that it's not yet here and enact ourselves into action to address the lack, thereby constantly living in a cycle of it's not here, get it here. It's not here, get it here, which is, you could say, a constant cycle of lack, enforce the lack, enforce the lack. Which, if you came here for an experience of limitation, if you came here to rebuff the infinite and your experience of the infinite, this is a perfect machine. This is an almost bulletproof way of, for each and every notion of infinite energy that you receive, you will almost instantly transform it into a perception of lack, of insufficiency and finiteness, which is everything we came here to experience. So now, what was the chorus talking about today? And why is this machine, as you might call it, experiencing some hiccups? As we touched on in the topic of depression last week, there are many sensations that humanity is experiencing today because we have expanded beyond this day-to-day cycle into a growing consciousness, an expanding consciousness that is slightly lifting up off the game and is perceiving and experiencing more than what our limited existence here has been. And so last week when we talked about depression, if you notice, and in the title we said this too, an expansive human is required because the kickoff point for depression is the ability to perceive something very far down your path of greatest expansion, something way out there in terms of energy that's very big and very loving and very new and very different. And then from the five senses perspective of our limitation, comparing the distance between those things and having a moment of, I don't know how to get there. That is the kickoff point for depression. That sensation of, I don't know what to do, which can then knock the human, in a sense, into an energetic eddy where their own attention to these opposing forces of the thing that they sense that's huge, that they know that they want or they want to move towards, and then an equally opposing force of they don't know how to get there by way of action. And their attention to these two opposing forces is what we call a sense of feeling stuck, a sense of feeling powerless, or also at times what we call a sense of depression. So the Course is bringing this up again this week because it's a very powerful and very far-reaching point that because humanity is able to perceive more and more things energetically, but we are still also having one foot in the game, we are having a very interesting experience of the sensations that come from this broadening perspective. And what they pointed out today is that humans everywhere can perceive much more on energetic frequencies than they realize. So, have you ever had an experience where you have felt some sort of strong emotion and you just don't know why? Maybe you are depressed. Maybe you are angry or agitated or nervous or emotional or crying very easily at who knows what. And when someone says to you, "Why do you feel this way?" there is a part of you that will look at all the things going on in your life and will really try and draw a connection. And it'll say, I don't know, I'm just so stressed at work lately. Or I guess I'm just really sad that this thing happened. Or I don't know, I saw this in the news, or I saw this kid crying at the grocery store, or I watched this happen in my neighborhood, right? And so you're reaching almost to explain the emotion. And sometimes it fits. Sometimes it's like, yeah, that's what I'm upset about. And then other times it kind of feels like it doesn't totally explain it. Like maybe it would on paper to somebody else. But if you look at your own depth of emotion or intensity of emotion, it kind of feels like that thing doesn't merit this sensation. Like, yes, maybe you saw a kid upset at the grocery store and then you started crying too, but also like it really got to you. Like, why did it get to you that much? Now, as the chorus said today, they said, we see right now in humankind a great deal of agitation, of mental instability, as you would call it, in large part due to your burgeoning abilities to perceive more, to receive more than is validated by your five senses. And it is this last part that is usually what drives a human bonkers. Is that you don't have anything really in your five senses environment that you can point to that will explain this thing. And when a human starts to feel this way, they will look even deeper for reasons as to why. So we will start going to therapy. We will start digging up childhood traumas. We will start looking into the toxicity of our environment and in our body. We will start looking for health reasons. We will start looking for mental reasons. We will start looking for historical reasons or environmental reasons to explain the way that we are feeling. And this is because, of course, you have an expansive human who is perceiving something energetically, but then you also have this foot in the five senses that is activating beliefs that really wants to do something. There's a thing that you've perceived that is lacking, is not yet present on the five senses. And so there's almost this churning, this like, I got to solve this. I got to do something about this. I got to take action. I always take action, but I don't know what action to take here. If I were to ask you, what percentage of people on the average do you think believe in conspiracy theories? What would you say? I know you're saying, wait, what? Katie, how did we get to conspiracy theories? Hang on. It's going to make sense. It's going to make sense. But take a guess. Take a guess on the average. And this study that I found, I won't even quote because we're just making an illustrative point. But generally speaking, this number holds true, even over, I think, a couple decades. And I think the people surveyed are mostly in the US, but not totally sure. But ballpark, how many people, percentage wise, would you say believe in some sort of conspiracy theory? I was actually surprised to read that it hovers around 50%. About half of people believe in some sort of conspiracy theory, and it can range from aliens to government to history to whatever it is, right? So it's not very specific. And sometimes that number changes depending on the particular conspiracy theory. But if you sort of aggregate them all up and round them up, about half. Now, you could say, and most psychologists do, that conspiracy theories are sort of rooted in or based upon periods of instability in a society. That conspiracy theories arise in the context of fear, anxiety, mistrust, uncertainty, and feelings of powerlessness. And psychologists will say, as a result, humans tend to create explanations. They tend to create reasons why they're feeling this way and reasons why things are happening. They create a narrative, they create an explanation for the things that they believe must be happening, for which existing explanations to them feel insufficient. I found this really interesting because if you listen to what the chorus said today, they said, hey, you all are experiencing all sorts of energetic perceptions, but you don't know it yet. And when they say you all, I think they really mean it. And I want to emphasize this point. This is not reserved for some special class of humans. This is not only for people like me who channel or do other stuff. It's everybody. It's humanity. Humanity is awakening, and humans of today, this day and age, are able to perceive things energetically, and we are just awakening to our own existent capacities to do this. And so they said, we see it. We see a lot of what you would call mental instability. But we see it as you guys figuring out that you are sensing things beyond the five senses manifestations. To a human, this often feels today like anxiety and uncertainty and unknown. Because we have these giant feelings that come over us, these sensations. And then when we look around, we're not sure what's causing it. And so the beliefs of action activate, and they say, well, we got to take some sort of action because something's missing. We are perceiving something and it's not here yet. And we're not sure what it is, but we got to do something because that's what we do. We take action. And so we all run around eating sugary foods or going to therapy or taking anti-anxiety meds or waking up in the middle of the night and then trying to go back to sleep, right? We get caught up sort of in this doingness to try to address it. And it's over a period of time as these feelings continually return to us, as this ability to perceive energy continues to crop up, that we finally say, no, I think it's got to be something else. From my perspective, this has a lot to do with conspiracy theories. If I look at my fellow human beings and I understand that they are all perceiving things that they cannot yet explain on a five senses spectrum, I can understand why one of the things humans might get busy doing is tying together the evidence that they do have on the five senses spectrum into new and different packages that will help them to understand the things that they are genuinely perceiving. This is not a commentary on whether or not conspiracy theories are all true or all false, or some are and some aren't, because that's all five senses manifestation stuff, and everybody can manifest whatever reality it is that they want. Beauty of the infinite universe. Rather, this is a larger, broader statement on humanity's current point in the process of awakening and our trajectory. That if you have a group of people who are deeply enmeshed in belief systems about needing to do and explain things from a five senses standpoint, and then those people begin to expand and perceive all sorts of things beyond that, that I could understand how and why they would try to connect things together in that five senses environment to explain how they feel. And doesn't it work for a minute? Doesn't it work for a minute to find a theory or find something that you think explains these sensations? And you think, that's that, resolved that. You even sometimes find a community of like-minded people who are feeling the same way. And in that community, you find validation of the things that you are perceiving. You perceive a greater mystery. You perceive a greater knowingness. You perceive more out there than is currently explained in society. You experience all of these things, and then you get to find other people who do too. And whatever story or narrative or thing that brings you together, the point is that humanity's starting to come together on these ideas, but also on these sensations, that we're starting to acknowledge that we do actually feel things that are often inexplicable. And though we are still at a phase of looking for the reasons in what has already manifested on the five senses, we are growing ever closer to trusting the fact that we do perceive these things. So let's go back to me in that hotel room in the tropics, feeling all sorts of who knows what for a period of months before this trip, and then finding that I was still feeling these sensations, meaning every excuse that I had had to give to myself about how it must be related to preparing for this trip, being afraid of taking the trip, or any other related reason must have been false, because there I was on the trip and none of it had dissipated, and in fact, it had intensified. So I sat down with the chorus and they told me something like we've just discussed. You perceive things that are on energetic wavelengths. Those things aren't here yet. Well, being a human, from my human perspective, that only freaked me out even more. Because it felt to me like they were saying things are coming and there's really nothing to do about it. You are simply perceiving the path that you're on. Being a five senses human, being in that vantage point while connecting to them, I could feel their perspective of trust and their perspective of flow and allowance of these things. But also, I was still very active in the needing to do something when there's a lack, when I sense something that I need to make happen in the five senses environment. And additionally, when I was sensing something that felt largely out of my control. Trying to do the best that I could, I sort of started to just focus on, well, when will the thing that I am sensing manifest? In a sense, how much longer do I have to deal with this ongoing energetic perception of things before it finally just lands and I can just deal with it in the way a five senses human would? Now, for the most part, over the years, when I asked them a question like that, they wouldn't really answer, because they understood that I understood now, I didn't understand then, that I was on a trajectory, that I was expanding, and that my ability to ask that question meant that I was resonating very closely with the actual thing itself. And so they are never spoilers. They never give it away right before it manifests. They would simply get a little more vague. And that's how I knew that something was coming very closely, which for many years also just served to freak me out even more. But over time, I've sort of learned to trust the things that they are foretelling or reflecting to me, because they have all been very loving experiences that have helped me to better understand myself and everything that I have just gone through. But this time, they actually gave a very specific answer. They said, it'll happen very soon. And I said, well, what will happen? And they said, something that will affect you all. Now, when the chorus says something like that, it is impossible to know who you all is. If it's like me and my husband, if it's like everybody on earth, like they're just real crap at being specific like humans are. So I sort of just accepted it. But I remember one thing they said very specifically, that honestly, it's only in the last week that this came through to me in a new way. They sort of made a joke and they said, but when it happens, it will greatly affect their timeline. Now, this all sounded very ominous, and I didn't like the sound of it at all. And so I was very busy being afraid and sort of dealing with my agitation and trusting that the chorus is like, it's coming and it's okay, but also feeling what I was feeling, being a human of like, I got to do something to prepare for this. And so I sort of missed it. I sort of missed the fact that they said their timeline. Now, as we've talked about before in episode 10, I believe, that as I met different beings and got to know their different belief systems, some belief systems had very close similarities to our belief systems, our human belief systems, and some of them didn't. Some of the beings just aren't affected by time or distance or space. They're sort of just like free flowing, balls of love and light. and then some beings are much more similar to us. They feel like us. They have beliefs about body and things like that. And so I missed it. I missed it when the chorus said their timeline. Now, as we talked about last week, the idea of linear time is very much a quintessential part of the human belief system. We structure our entire existence and reality based on this concept, or have done so. Up until recently, it's starting to become a little more flexible. And so it didn't occur to me that what they were suggesting was a being or a type of encounter with a being who wasn't that far off of my beliefs. Missed it entirely. So the next morning, it's time for us to leave. And I'm actually quite excited. And really, so was my husband, too. We'd had enough time away from my son, and we really just wanted to get home. We missed him. We were over it. We were ready to get back to the States. So we get on the airplane and we get up into the air and we're heading to, I believe, LA was our first layover. And about an hour into the flight, the pilot comes on the PA to make an announcement. And in that, very calm pilot voice, he says, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we're going to have to make an emergency landing in this other country. We are unable to retract our flap. He kind of goes into this explanation about what's wrong with the plane in a very calm voice. Just very subtly, if you were really paying attention, you would notice the words emergency landing, but most people were listening to their movies or asleep with the lights off or whatever. So, I look at my husband, he looks at me and I'm like, okay, so I guess we're diverting to another country. And he goes, yeah. And now you would think that all those sensations of dread and nervousness and anxiety that I had had for 3 months leading up to this moment would have sort of just culminated, right? Like, this is it. Oh my gosh, I knew this was coming. Oh, we're going to crash, sort of like it would just sort of flow overboard. But instead, there was this really amazing light feeling of validation of like, oh, this was it. This was it. I still don't know what's coming, but I know that it's starting right now. And so I know this is going to sound bizarre, but I totally put on a comedic movie and had a soda and sat back and had a great time while we were diverting to this other country to land. I know the way this sounds. Okay, but it's only going to get weirder. Stay with me. So we land and, as we're coming into the airport, I'm sort of checking in with the chorus, not overtly channeling, but sort of just like in that free-flowing, loving place. It feels very strong to me at this point. And I look out the window as we're nearing the airport and, the pilot comes on the PA again. And in his calm pilot voice, he says, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, you might notice some emergency vehicles parked on the side of the runway. That's just standard procedure, nothing to worry about. So you look out the window and the entire runway is lined with emergency vehicles. I mean, there must have been 20 vehicles lined on both sides. And then as we land, everyone's sort of gripping their armrests, but it all seems, quite fine. And we land and there's a bump or two, but then we're down safely. And everyone sort of exhales a breath of relief. And then we sort of pull up next to the emergency vehicles. And you look outside, and like half the airport employees who are stationed on the emergency vehicles all have their phones out and we're recording, as in like to catch the crash, I suppose, as we landed. But there was no crash. There was nothing. We just landed. And they said, okay, we don't know, if how long it's going to take to repair the plane. Everyone deplane. The government of this country has said it's okay. You just have to stay in the airport, in the terminal, and then we'll get you all back on here and we'll get home to the United States. It is not lost on me at this point that this is definitely something unplanned. It was just, it was everything the chorus had suggested, that something unexpected was going to happen that would affect all of us. Now, at this juncture, I am imagining that the all of us is perhaps all of us on the plane. And yet, the way that it had resonated when the chorus had expressed that to me felt much bigger, much bigger. Like, I don't know, the whole planet or humanity or something like that. And so I was quite relieved, of course, when we didn't crash, but also kind of curious because I didn't understand, despite my sensations of validation and this is it, and okay, we're here now, and all those needs to do action were all just relaxing. Everything was just simmering down. Does that make sense? Without my say so, without my conscious, like this is done, no more need to do action. It was as if the things that I had been perceiving energetically were coming home to roost. And in so doing, all of my beliefs about needing to do action to make something happen were diminishing because the thing that was going to happen was now happening. Does that make sense? Okay. So very clearly, we were not supposed to be there. This was not part of the plan. All of this was abrupt. We have been diverted to another country. And perhaps that's it. But I really wasn't sure. Okay, so we go into the terminal, we get some food. More time passes, and I'm getting bored. So I decide to go for a walk. So I'm wandering through the airport and I'm just going as far as I can. So I pass all these other gates and I pass these other gates and I pass other gates. And I finally get to the far side of everything. And I end up in a terminal that's relatively empty. I mean, there's nobody waiting at the gates. There's no staff at the gates. It's just sort of me and a bunch of chairs. And I'm sort of marveling at this experience that I had known something was coming, that I had sensed something, and that I really believed in that moment that it had been real, that my senses were valid. And so I was sort of having a good time walking through this empty airport terminal. And I was sort of just practicing, feeling that loving place with the chorus. And as I'm walking and sort of channeling, sort of expansive, I feel sort of a sensation to the side of me. And I turn and I look. And there is a man, I guess you could describe him as, leaned back in this sea of empty chairs in this empty terminal. And he, I realize, is looking at me. But he's not looking at me. He's looking at the space around me as if in shock. And I realize for a moment and am confused about what he could possibly be seeing. And then, as I wonder that about him, he looks me in the eye at this distance. And I felt a type of electricity move through me that I have never felt before. If I were to put it in words, and I know this is going to sound strange, I would tell you that that was not exactly a human person. So different did he feel. And at this point, I had connected with a variety of different beings. And so it was almost automatic, my ability to understand a fellow human versus something else, even though I didn't have many words for the something else's. And this was a something else, and it was on my frequencies, and it took my breath away. So I didn't break stride. I turned away from him and I just kept walking. But the whole time I was floored because every experience that I had had with the chorus so far had been on frequencies that were non physical. It was voices in my head or in my heart. And sometimes I would write them down or speak them out loud, but that was it. And the chorus had told me that it would be quite some time until the things that we were discussing manifested. And so for years, it had been me, them, and a variety of sensations that had never been validated until this. So I walk back to our gate and we finally get back on the airplane. And from this point on, I had a very distinct sense that I was being watched or monitored. I know it sounds very strange, but I started kind of looking over my shoulder and like as if I had been spotted, perhaps is a way to say it. So we land in LA and we're on the far side of LAX and we had to come in a place they didn't expect and they have to bus us way over the joint. And then we finally get our bags and then we have to walk 2 terminals over to get to the place where they'll reroute us because by now all of our connections have been missed. And we're standing at the counter, and sort of chaos starts to ensue because the airline doesn't announce it, but tells the first few members of our flight at the counter that they will not be reimbursing for hotels or any other expenses that were caused by way of the delay and the rerouting and the emergency landing. And people start to lose their shit. So my husband and I get up to the counter and we start talking to the person and we start trying to figure out how quickly we can get home to our son. And it's starting to look obvious that we won't be able to get home until tomorrow and nobody will. And all of us are going to have to find hotel rooms. And come to find out, it's a holiday weekend in LA, and the vast majority of hotel rooms around the airport are already booked. And so people are starting to yell and get angry. And, it's been a long day, emergency landings and all that. And so, not really thinking about it, I start to reach for that place. I start to reach for that loving place where I go when I channel. And I felt sort of the calmness come over me. And I was able to sort of see the rest of the humans around me getting angry and pissed and totally understanding it. But also, I was feeling something quite different. So my husband says to me, "Come on, let's go. Let's get out of here." So we walk out to the curb and it's late at night. So, there's some cars here and there, but largely speaking, the sidewalk is empty. And I'm standing there in my hoodie and I've got my hood up. And I'm sort of just staying in this place while my husband talks to an Uber driver. And then I feel it again, that same sensation from the other terminal. And I look to my side, and as if out of nowhere, there's the man again. And he's looking at me again as if completely amazed and mystified, but he's not looking at me. He's looking at the space around me. And then he sort of recognizes that I'm looking at him and he's a little startled. And he sort of kind of nods to me, but is sort of like, "Are you really seeing me?" And I, terrified by his reaction, just sort of pull my hood down further over my face and get in the cab and drive away. Now, you will say, "Well, Katie, what the hell was that? And who was he? And what happened next?" And I could tell you all of those opinions that I have about that thing. But to be honest, it's still unfolding. I don't know that I have a name for it yet. I have pondered this story many times over the last few years. I have tried to understand who or what I encountered, why it felt the way that it did, why it happened in the way that it did. And to be honest, I don't know. Is it okay that I have some things that are inexplicable? In the beginning, it wasn't. In the beginning, it was harder. But now, after having done this for so many years with the chorus, you sort of get into a cadence of there's always both. There are always things that are known, and then there are always things that are unknown. And they sort of go back and forth and weave together, and you sort of just move through them. And they always expand. And so I hesitated to even tell this story today because I don't know what point to make about it. I'm not sure what I'm trying to explain in telling you this, except that from my standpoint today, that experience helped me to see that what I had felt in the months leading up to that trip may have been related to that experience, which means that I was able to foresee or sense something coming 3 months in advance. And though we won't get into it today, I have other examples of things that I have felt that have not manifested sometimes for over a year or longer on the five senses. I share this because, well, I guess I hope it validates your experiences. I have a lot of friends and neighbors feeling and sensing and perceiving some amazing stuff, but they're not sure why. And they're looking for reasons and they're trying to find answers and they're trying to do something and address it. And so I'm offering you perhaps a different perspective, that all those emotions and those sensations that are so strong that come over you are not because you are emotionally unstable. It's not because you can't handle life. It's not because of any failing that you have. From my perspective, I have had for many years now and continue to have a dual track. I have always the things that I am doing and saying and experiencing on the five senses. But then I also have this other spiritual perception that is pretty persistent, that there's always something I'm sensing that I can't explain, or something I am digesting that I've just experienced with the chorus, or any other number of things. I do believe that at some point, these two worlds, I guess you could say, that I experience will come closer together, that the span between them won't seem so distinct. But for now, as I am experiencing awakening in this way, at least, there are these new energetically perceptive parts of myself that I'm not really sure yet how to plug into my existing context. And so I'd like to make a suggestion that perhaps when you go out into the world and you see people dealing with some sort of emotion, upset or agitated or angry or who knows what, and you see what it is that is the probable cause, or maybe they even tell you what the probable cause is, and it just doesn't seem to line up, that they just seem way more out of control or grappling with stuff that seems far more difficult. And you think, man, those people are losing it. Or maybe you've even had that thought about yourself. I would like to suggest an alternative view, that in every one of those instances, what you are seeing is a human that is awakening, that is perceiving and sensing things that are real, that are valid, and that are happening somewhere beyond the five senses perspective. That there are many humans today that have a dual track, that they are here enmeshed with us in the five senses, doing a thing like dropping their kid off at school or shopping for groceries or who knows what, but that there is another part of them that is sensing so much more. And so It's up to you. You can call that mental instability, as we often do, or you can call that an awakening human. Choice is yours. Or maybe, as the chorus does, you could even call it both. Because as soon as we begin to allow for and trust and accept these larger parts of ourselves and the energetic perceptions that they are capable of, the sooner we will expand into the perception of what it was all truly about. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found these messages to be helpful. May they accelerate you on your path wherever you'd like it to go. For more information, check out our website at katieandthechorus.com. There you will find show quotes, episode transcripts, details on our book, The Book of Human Awakening, as well as our newsletter sign up. Visit katieandthechorus.com. Thanks again. See you next time.